Hey everybody, today we're talking about metal. No, not heavy metal the music, Metal the comic book by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Hey everybody and welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I am your host, Brent. Today we're going to talk about DC's metal because we have dark metal, heavy metal, with the sequel to Metal coming out this week, either in some comic stores on Tuesday and Comixology, and then other stores on Wednesday. You got the whole deal with Diamond and not Diamond shipping with DC and all that stuff. So basically, the sequel's coming out this week. I'm excited for it. Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo did a great run on the New 52 Batman. They followed that up with the Metal series, and now we're finishing up with heavy metal. If they do a third one, I don't know if they're going to call it like the heaviest metal. I don't know how you get more metal than heavy metal from regular metal. Extreme metal? Maybe. So basically, if you need a refresher or haven't read Metal, I reread it today and yesterday just for you, so that we could talk about it and kind of give a primer on what's what in the DC universe and where we've been since Metal released, I think like a year and a half ago. It was a long time ago. We're now in 2020, sometime in the end times or something like that. So anyway, let's get on with it. So what do you need to know about heavy metal? Well, basically heavy metal, this series that's coming out, is basically meant to wrap everything together. Scott Snyder's been saying it all matters. There's a great podcast to listen to with Scott Snyder and John Suntress on it's called Word Balloon. Scott Snyder gives like a 2-hour interview there, and he talks all about metal and heavy metal and where we're going with this book. So stay excited. It's coming there. But I suggest you go listen to it. He kind of gives what's going on a little bit in the Metal book, in the new one, and goes back into like the creation of the Metal idea and, you know, why he likes the Batman Who Laughs and all these other things. So what is going on? Oh my gosh, it's hard to know where to start with this. It's pretty crazy. So all this is meant to tie in basically all the different events of the DC universe together in continuity, whereas we know it as readers because we're looking outside of continuity, right? This is the universe, it changes, we have another event, it reboots the universe so we get a new one. Well, this is kind of meant to take all that into account within DC's continuity. That's something that they've always kind of tried to do. They wouldn't just reboot something and then not have anybody aware of it. Like in the old DC days, you had Earth 1 and Earth 2, and then you had Crisis on Infinite Earths. That got rebooted. Then you had no multiverses, and then you had Infinite Crisis and the 52 event, and then you had multiple endless universes, and then you had the New 52, which shrunk everything back down again after Final Crisis, I believe, which was kind of also the rebirth of the multiverse. Anyway, then you had you had Flashpoint after that, and so many different events. That's what brought us the New 52 and shrank everything down, and then somewhere within New 52 we had the universes boom again into 52 universes, not New 52. Like New 52 was 52 books, but there are also 52 universes within the multiverse, right? Confusing? Confused yet? Here comes another layer. So they give us a map of the multiverse here that was put out by DC. It's in Grant Morrison's Multiversity book, where you have like Earth Zero, which is the one that we follow in the main Superman, Batman books and stuff like that. And they say, okay, here's the multiverse. Got it? Cool. They take this map, they flip it over, and they say, that right there, like it's blank, it's black. What's the deal? And they're like, that right there is the dark multiverse. And there's stuff coming out of there. Well, what is the dark multiverse? Where Metal, the original event, is where you find out what the dark multiverse is. The main book, you can read all 6 issues without, reading a lot of the tie-ins. I read some of the tie-ins in my reread today, but they're absolutely not necessary. Even the prelude issues, we had Metal Forge, or it was called Dark Knights the Forge, and then Dark Knights the Casting. I did a whole video on it way back in the day, and I was confused then. I'm still confused now as to what those were and why they were necessary. Basically, they're not. And the only thing they might really do is set up like a few panels in one of the Metal books where they say Batman looked into what was coming and had a vision or something like that. That's all they really set up. The main guy that they talk about, Barbatos, who is the demon that you're trying to defeat in the Metal book, is really mentioned from like the first issue of the Metal book, not the Forge and the Casting. The Dark Batman that he raises up, all those guys are not in that prelude. They're kind of in shadow, but even their name's not mentioned. So do you need to read them? I don't think so. Start with Metal number 1, go through 6. You don't need to read Batman Lost. You don't need to read Hawkman Found. You don't need to read Wild Hunt. Dark Knight's Wild Hunt is a tie-in to the series. I read half of it, and then I started skimming it because I remembered, oh yeah, this gets into that weird Final Crisis music stuff that I didn't like from Grant Morrison. Scott Snyder kind of uses that. So the only thing you need to know about Dark Knight's Wild Hunt is like that's where Flash and Bobo Chimp and the Ultima Thule, which is the ship that's in Metal 6, come in from. And but even how they got there I don't think is really explained, because there's a tie-in called Bats Out of Hell with Justice League, Hal Jordan, the Green Lanterns, and what else? Some other things. That's not even tells you how they get to the Ultima Thule. So it's not really necessary. Just stick with the main book. Sometimes they say you can read the main book without the tie-ins and know what's going on. And sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. In this case, it is. If you want to look at a case of where it's not true, try and read Blackest Night 0 through 7 and figure out what the hell is going on. Because really, to read Blackest Night, you need to read every interspersing issue of Green Lantern in between those issues. And that it's like a 18-issue story at that point instead of just 7. It's crazy. Anyway, we're talking about Metal, right? So the writer is Scott Snyder. The artist is Greg Capullo. They're fantastic. They're great. I like Greg Capullo's new kind of chintzy, cartoonish, simple, but imaginative art style. He's pulled back a whole lot from the over-rendered Todd McFarlane stuff he was doing when he was on Spawn for a long, long time ago, and this is kind of his style that he developed on Batman, and, you know, he's just kind of stayed consistent throughout that. And what's really cool is, at least on Batman, it felt like he could hit a monthly schedule and put a book out every month. And if this is what it takes for him to hit a monthly schedule and let someone else ink him, fantastic, more power to him. I like the style. It's very cool. Some people may not like it. It's very stylistic, and sometimes when you go that way, you can swing one way or the other in terms of people liking or disliking and taste and stuff like that, right? So that's that. So what is Metal, right? So let's get down to it. Metal is the story of the demon Barbatos, who was the dragon of the original World Forge in which the multiverse was birthed. And he was originally devouring the things that did not turn into multiverse universes, right? So any rejects he would devour, and then those rejects would become into him, and then the dark multiverse became his domain. So he is trying to end everything and bring the dark multiverse up out of the shadows and into the regular multiverse and have it take its place with everything else. So what's not explained in the main series is how the dark multiverse works. That's really kind of explained in the one-shots with all the different Batmen. You have the Red Dawn, the Murder Machine, Dawnbreaker, the Drowned, the Merciless, and finally the Batman Who Laughs. The Batman Who Laughs is kind of Barbatos' like number one henchman, and he goes around and collects all these different dark Batmen from times where Bruce Wayne went crazy and became the Flash, or became like Doomsday, or became like Aquaman, or became like Cyborg, and all these different things. And basically the dark multiverse Earths are born out of the fears from people in the regular multiverse. And they exist very shortly, and then they kind of wither and die and go away. So the Batman Who Laughs is one of these where where Bruce Wayne kind of becomes like the Joker. Not the Joker, he's not evil, he's still Batman, but he's crazy and evil at the same time. And they go and collect all these different versions of Bruce Wayne and pluck them out of the dark multiverse from the fears that Bruce has. Like, I could become Doomsday and mess around with Doomsday DNA in an effort to stop Superman and kill everything I love. Well, that's one guy. I could be that one of them he's a woman, or one of them he's a Green Lantern, and takes over that because he has such amazing willpower, and everything goes bad basically. So the Batman Who Laughs takes all these different characters and makes them like his henchmen team to aid Barbatos. And they're all helping Barbatos because they want their Earths to become real. Because as they kind of are plucked out of their Earth by the Batman Who Laughs, who doesn't have an easier name than that, you have to call him that every single time. They have been in the books for the last 18 months. Their Earth disappears and withers away out of existence, basically. So they want their Earths back because that's what they knew, that's what they loved, that kind of thing. So they're kind of a team. And it's strange because you read these main 6 books and they're not explored at all. The one-shots were there to tell you who they were, but they're really not a team. Like, they kind of mostly exist in the tie-ins, in the Bats Out of Hell tie-ins with Justice League and Hal Jordan and Green Lantern and all that. And the Resistance tie-ins that are they're all collected with like Teen Titans and Nightwing and stuff, where they were fighting in Gotham, fighting the dark evil Batman and stuff like that. They're not really in the main book, which is weird considering how much of a character and main villain that the Batman Who Laughs has become in the last 18 months. So the heroes start out, they learn about Barbatos, and like Bruce is basically tricked into triggering the Barbatos and the evil Batman coming through the portal from the dark multiverse into our universe at the end of issue 2. There's a bunch of medals, and it kind of all lays out from the beginning of Scott Snyder's Batman run, from a medal where the Court of Owls, they called it Elysium. It kept all these people alive a long time. Then the Dionysium, which was the thing that fixed Joker's face after he tore it off, and made Bruce forget he was Batman for a while. They throw in 1 or 2 others that I can't remember exactly where they were from. And then the 5th one, which they make up here, was kind of really cheesy, but it's metal, right? It's Batmanium. So that is in issue 2, and then the rest of the 4 issues, 3 through 6, are the journey of our heroes. Batman and Superman kind of go into the dark multiverse and descend into there, and they have to kind of rescue each other. There's times where Superman's rescuing Batman, Batman's rescuing Superman from having no hope, and then they go and find the World Forge, the original World Forge, where the multiverse was forged, and the good ones came out and were set in what's called the Orrery. It's a hard name to pronounce, but an easy one to write down, I guess. Thanks, Grant Morrison. So they're kind of down there until the last issue, and they're trying to prevent the World Forge from becoming a Dark Forge, in which it only makes dark universes, right? Very cosmic, very wacky, very weird. Meanwhile, you have the rest of the Justice League trying to find other things of nth metal, which by the end of the series you find out is spelled nth, N-T-H, all throughout the DC universe. And this all ties back to Hawkman, because Hawkman and Hawkgirl use what's called nth metal, the same thing, to fly, right? That's what their wings are made of, their harness, whatever the hell, depending on what version of Hawkman you're talking about. That's a whole nother video. And they're trying to find more nth metal because nth metal helps do something against Barbatos and the evil Batman. It's never quite clear. It was spelled out, but there's so much craziness going on, it just washed away very quickly. So at the end, you find out that deep within the World Forge, this living metal of creation is called 10th metal. And that nth metal was never nth metal, it was 9th metal. Really, like 9, right? So the 10th medal is this medal of creation, and they're at the very end, our heroes put on the 10th medal, and they defeat the evil gods, evil demon Barbatos, and they're kind of done away with. And the Batman who laughs is trapped in a fight with the Joker, who is kind of pulled out of nowhere at the very end of the last issue, and that's where it ends. And it kind of sets up with an epilogue with the Justice League reforming in a Hall of Justice, and from there, Scott Snyder and George Jimenez took over the Justice League book. They did a whole thing with No Justice, and then Justice League, they did that for like 40 issues, and then that's where they left off and said, to be continued in Death Metal, and that's where we're going right now. Death Metal, Heavy Metal. What the fuck is this sequel called? I cannot get it straight. I'm sorry. I think it's Death Metal. You'd think I would know this. I love metal. Anyway, so what happened since then, right? That's a whole nother thing. So you have in this 6th issue in the epilogue, they tell you that the source wall was cracked. What the hell is a source wall, Brent? Well, basically, it's the wall around the entire orrery of worlds of the multiverse that keeps everything out of this multiverse, right? Well, isn't the multiverse everything? No, apparently not. There's a 4-issue No Justice series, which you can go read, drawn by Francis Manapul, where they get these weird things and try and do other things because there are evil gods that are angry about what happened here in the Metal series. That's a whole thing. Then you go into the main Justice League story, which is worth reading. I really enjoyed this run by Scott Snyder and the multitude of artists that joined him. Mostly it was George Jimenez, who's, I guess, going to do Batman for a while here now. But anyway, that's a whole thing where Lex Luthor forms the Injustice League as well, and they're going head-to-head over this thing called the Totality. And somewhere in the beginning of this, like 40 issues, they break the source wall. Not just a crack, which is what happens at the end of Metal 6, but they break open the source wall. And from the source wall comes this being called Perpetua. And who is Perpetua? Or Perpetua is the dark, evil god who created the multiverse entirely. So not God as in God, Jesus Christ, Holy Spirit, but like bigger than that, apparently. And she's evil, or beyond the concept of evil, but she's evil to us. She wants to destroy everything and start over again. Surprise, surprise, right? It's what they all want to do. And it turns out that the Monitor and Anti-Monitor are her sons. And not only that, there's a third son, and all this is kind of mentioned a little bit, like the seeds are planted in Metal 6 or 5, I think. And those 3 brothers are, meant to take sides. So the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, this ties back into that, because that was the original conflict between the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor. Then in this 40 issues, we meet the Forger, and he takes a side, the Anti-Monitor takes a side, and the Monitor takes a side between the Justice League and the Injustice Gang. Somewhere in here, Lex Luthor becomes what's called Apex Lex, which is kind of a cool name. And a lot of the humans on Earth are also turned into what's like called Apex Predators. They're all of a sudden like 7 feet tall and pale white with like claws and stuff. It's kind of weird. Lex seems to be the only one that really has his brain left over. So they kind of take place in the final battle in issue 39 and 38 of the Justice League book, right? So all that is happening, and you have basically what happens is our heroes lose. They lose after 40 issues. And there's a near thing in like 37, 38, and even 39 where you're like, they're going to win, they're going to win, they're going to win. And then boom, no, they lose. What's cool is like Perpetua speaks to everybody in the world or in the multiverse. Like, here are 2 sigils, the Justice Sigil and the Doom Sigil. The Doom Sigil looks a whole lot like the Hall of Doom. And you take a vote whether you think you should believe in justice or believe in doom. So everyone's cynical nature votes for doom because, bad things always happen. It never really turns out as good as you want it to be. here we are in 2020 experiencing all of that. So the Justice League loses the vote. And at the end of issue 39, the Justice League is pulled out from this battle by what's called the Quintessence. It consists of people like the Phantom Stranger, who is like this all-powerful being. It's still kind of confusing what he is at this point. Ganthet from the Guardians from Green Lantern, Highfather from the New Gods, and I think there's two others I can't remember. But anyway, they pull out the Justice League and basically are like, okay guys, you lost, but we saved you because she was going to destroy you because we want to prepare you for what's next, right? So what's next turns out to be what's coming out this week, Death Metal. In between all that, this is a lot, right? You have the Batman Who Laughs wreaking havoc. He's causing trouble for Lex and his plans, and eventually in the 4-issue miniseries called Hell Arisen, go read it, he battles Apex Lex for Perpetua's, favor, basically, and defeats Lex Luthor, and now is Perpetua's #1 gangster, I guess, henchman in that way. So that's why when we get to Death Metal, hopefully it's explained a little bit, there's a lot more evil Batman that have wreaked havoc on Earth. Now, from the podcast to listen to, I can tell you that it's going to start out the same way that Metal did, where like you're thrown in right away into whatever the first main conflict is. They're going to do some backtracking and tell you what happened in between, but it's going to be balls to the wall craziness from page 1, so get ready for that. So if that got you excited for Death Metal, let me know down in the comments. Hopefully I did an okay job of explaining what happened over the last 18 months in DC Comics since we had the original Metal book, without going into too much detail that you can go back and reread it if you want to. I don't think you're going to be able to do it in like 24 hours. Good luck. But, it's definitely a story I think is going to be looked back upon fondly, if not interestingly, to see where all these things ended up, because there's so many ties from Metal and the Batman Who Laughs to the Justice League story, and now Batman Who Laughs kind of taking place at the very end into whatever Death Metal ends up being. Who knows? But Death Metal is supposed to be the thing that ties everything together, from Crisis on Infinite Earths to Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis to Doomsday Clock, Flashpoint, Metal. Everything matters is what we've been told this entire time, and it's going to take all those things and tie them in together. That's a lot to say that you're going to do. Can Scott Snyder do it? Can Greg Capullo do it? We will find out over the next, 7 months. So let me know if you want me to do more heavy or death metal videos and talk about the books as they come out, and we will see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.